Welcome to Electric City Archives, a podcast of the Schenectady County Historical Society. My name is Buell. I'm the Schenectady County Historian. We are here today at the Maybe Farm in Rotterdam Junction. My guest is Chris Leonard, the City Historian. We're going to talk about Schenectady Genesis and a few other things with Chris. First of all, let me say Chris is a native of Hamden, Connecticut. He went to the University at Albany and majored in English and history, and he's been living in Schenectady for about 18 years now. Chris, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Bill.
Let me start by asking you about Schenectady Genesis, the wonderful book that Susan Staffa did 20 years ago or so, somewhere around there. Why did we need to do it over again?
Well, basically the original version, the first volume of Schenectady Genesis put forth by Dr. Susan Staffa in 2004 has been out of print for quite a while. You can find it on aftermarket websites, well over $100. But what really brought forward the need to redo it and reprint it was the publication of John Deering's Volume 2 last year. And that book sold very well, and in the midst of the sales and the marketing for that book, we talked to a lot of people, readers, bookstore owners, and the like, who really were interested in getting copies of Susan Staffa's original Volume 1 available. And simply put, the first printing of 1,000 copies completely sold out long ago.
Wow.
So as we began, I'm working with the Colonial Schenectady Project, who is the organization that has funded both works. And as we began to look at republishing Volume 1, we sat down and we kind of discussed what's happened in the 17 years since that book came out. And the study of Schenectady, relations with the Haudenosaunee and Algonquin peoples, and the Dutch Reformed Church, there has been so much scholarship done in these past 17 years. I mean, we've seen the Netherlands government has translated and put new documentation online. Charles Geering and his crew at the New York State Museum and Archives continue to translate and put forward new materials. A number of the family societies, like the Maybe Family Society, has done a lot of research. So knowledge of what we know about the Maybes, the Truaxes, the VLs, that's all changed. There have been dendrochronology reports done by Cornell University on the Maybe farm and some of the homes within the stockade. So as all of this is going on, there's also been at least 20 books that have been published in this 17-year period, which significantly covers Schenectady, our relations with the Native American peoples and the Dutch Reformed Church, and all of them bring forward new sources. So it became quickly apparent that we couldn't just reprint this book. We had to take it from a whole new cut and a whole new look because there's so much new information. And while Dr. Staffa did such a great job with the first book, a lot of her assumptions ended up being incorrect, not because they were wrong at the time. It's just that there's so much new scholarship that's come forward.
Mm-hmm. Who are some of your favorite Schenectadians from the colonial period? Are there a few people who stand out?
From the colonial period, my favorites actually are a little later than the pure on, Dutch settlement period. I'm a big fan of James Finn and all the Ellis brothers. I think the work that they did in the fur trade and moving Schenectady's presence in conjunction a lot with Sir William Johnson out all the way to Detroit, and just making the presence of Schenectady so much larger is really interesting and important.
While you bring up William Johnson in the 1770s, what's going to be going on in this area to help commemorate the American Revolution?
Well, there's a number of things that are going on involving both the American Revolution and Sir William Johnson. In fact, there's one thing I'm personally involved with, and two events that are taking place out at the Fort Plain Museum later on this summer. One is a conference on Sir William Johnson, and the other is a conference on the American Revolution in the Mohawk Valley. Both of these events I'm attending as an attendee. I'm not speaking at either of them, but I'm just really excited about the programs that they're putting forward, because so much of what happened during the American Revolution that would really set the stage and continued to drive on towards important battles like the Battle of Saratoga and the American victory there take place because of what goes on in the Mohawk Valley throughout the earlier periods. And it's such a shame that, I didn't grow up in New York State, so when my education revolving around the American Revolution had to do with mostly Boston, the surrender in Virginia, stuff that happened in New York City, even though they lost the Battle of Brooklyn, which they don't like to talk about, and occasionally some mentions of the Battle of Saratoga because it was important. But everything that takes place in the Mohawk Valley, that crucible really helps to determine what happens later on. And also the work that is done there by the Schenectady Militia, the Tryon County Militia, the Albany County Militia, to stop the invasions coming down from Canada helps stall the British attack that could have done so much more damage to the revolutionary cause.
So this is all in the planning stages right now, other than the two programs you mentioned this summer, which are going to be in person.
Right.
And on Zoom, I assume, too. So we're going to start celebrating the American Revolution in 2025.
Well, the big celebration, of course, will be in 2026, which will be the 250th anniversary of the start of the American Revolution, or the Declaration of Independence, so much. I'm part of the Revolution 250 working committee, which is about 50 or 60 of us historians from throughout the state. And we are beginning to look at ways to commemorate the various events of the American Revolution, not just looking purely at July 4th, 2026, but looking at the entire phase of the revolutionary period. And it's really interesting the way we're going about it, because not only are we obviously going to call to honor the names and the important battles that we all know, but we're making a very significant and important cut in looking at the engagement of Native Americans, how the enslaved population was involved. We're also going to spend a good bit of time looking at loyalists and dissenters, and we need to come at, we're coming at history now instead of from just one perspective, but from as many perspectives as we can to, get the totality of what the American Revolution meant and continues to mean.
You have a Zoom presentation coming up at the Erie Canal Museum in Syracuse.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that and when it is.
The event that I'm speaking in is part of the Erie Canal Museum's Erie Eats program, which is a weekly program that goes on that takes place at noon, so you can sit around and enjoy your lunch, while various historians and other folks talk about how the Erie Canal has impacted their communities, how it has impacted food and other transportation items. So when I was, I'm friends with Derek Pratt out there at the Erie Canal Museum, and most of the events that they were doing, and these are all free and online, are very, were Syracuse to sort of middle of the state related. So I kind of thought we in Schenectady were getting a little bit of short shrift. So I pitched an idea to him to look at how the Erie Canal, which even though it opened officially in 1825, started in 1817 in Schenectady all the way out to Little Falls, was working at that time. But I'm taking a look at how the impact that the visitors and travelers and settlers in Schenectady who came via the Erie Canal changed the foodways in Schenectady from pretty much 1817 up until about the 1850s. And the city itself at that point was largely an Anglo-Dutch community, and the food that's here very much takes on those characteristics. But as you begin to start getting other folks coming from Europe, and these are the folks who come from Germany, you see folks coming from Poland, Eastern Europe, and even though it's an Anglo-Dutch community, you're seeing a much larger influx of Irish coming in, and Scots-Irish were already here, but greater numbers of them as well. And how these people who travel across the ocean, land in New York City, then come up north, hit Schenectady before the big turn west, how what they view as food changes what takes place in Schenectady in terms of food.
Okay. Let's move onward a bit. You live in the GE Realty plot. I'm wondering what your first reaction was to the place when you saw it initially.
My first reaction to the GE plot was actually a mistaken walk. I had moved to, I came to the Capital District in 1988 to go to SUNY Albany. And I moved to Schenectady in 2003 with my wife. And I had to go to Ellis Hospital to get some blood drawn. Nothing serious. This is back in 2003. And so I decided to walk because it was a nice day and I was living on Lakewood Avenue. So I'm walking along and I'm going down Rugby, and then I take that right onto Lenox Road. And suddenly it's like, what the heck has happened? What are these houses? And while I've always been interested in history, I hadn't really done a lot of research of Schenectady until a few years later. And I'm looking at these amazing houses and trying to figure out what's going on, because obviously I've wandered into the historic Tony section of Schenectady, but I didn't know why it was there. So got my blood drawn, walked back home, looked at more of these houses, walked around the whole neighborhood, and then, in earnest began doing some research on what this was, and kind of had this eureka moment that, Schenectady historically is a lot more than I had, ever thought beyond, at that point, my thoughts are really just GE's history and Alco's history. And yes, these houses were related in many ways to General Electric, but I had no idea that, the history of the individuals who lived there, and the intense and avant-garde for the time architecture that was being used in that neighborhood.
And the time period when it was created was?
The original signing of the land over from Union College takes place in May of 1899, and the houses begin being built in earnest. And the first ones start being constructed in are completed in the year 1900. Although there were already two houses that were standing in the plot that predate the plot. Mm-hmm. Then for the next, pretty much the next 15 to 25 years, the majority of the homes in the plot are built, and a few dribble in after 1923, but not too many.
Is there another GE Realty plot walking tour in our future? Those things were so wonderful.
Yes, well, for those who don't know, pre-COVID, for the few years beforehand, I was doing, once a month, I was doing walking tours through the GE plot, one Saturday a month from May through October, in conjunction with the Schenectady County Historical Society. Obviously, last year I did not do any of them because of COVID, and I don't have any actual planned yet, but I am looking at launching them again in July, doing one Saturday in July, August, September, and October. We feel like we're moving out of COVID. The CDC guidelines have changed so that we can meet outside in groups if we're vaccinated. I probably will still maintain social distancing and masking requirements, just because we don't know who has been vaccinated and who hasn't, and we want to make sure everybody's safe while they get to learn about the wonderful neighborhood and the fascinating characters who lived there.
And in 2022, can we see the kind of tour where we actually go into the houses, maybe?
Well, the GE Realty plot has traditionally, on odd-numbered years, had their house and garden tour, in which usually 5 or 6 homes are open to the public, and that would have been this year, but it has not. It takes place. They usually take place in early June, and there's nothing scheduled for this year. So we will probably see in 2022 our neighborhood yard sale, and hopefully in 2023 we'll see a return to the house and garden tour.
When did you realize that Schenectady had such an interesting baseball history?
I have always loved baseball, and I've always been a big fan of what we would refer to as old-timey baseball. So, even before I moved to Schenectady, from a very young age, from basically 1976, when I was just a youngin' watching baseball games and football games, I've been collecting baseball cards, football cards, sports memorabilia. So every time I've moved from city to city, I've always done research. Once I've gotten there, I've always done research on, what were the predominant historical trends in that city. Basically because, both of my parents were history professors, so that's what we grew up talking about around the table. So that's comfortable for me. And as strange as that may sound, I like to know and understand, the fabric of where I live. So as I was looking, and this is back in 2002 through 2003 when I first moved into Schenectady, studying all of the things that had taken place. I came across the Mohawk Giants, the Blue Jays having been here, and then some of the even earlier teams, the Frog Alleys and the Dorpians, and just became fascinated with the baseball history here and the deep baseball tradition that this city has, even though it has never had a professional major league team. I love old timey baseball.
Coming up in a few weeks, in the middle of June, will be Juneteenth. We are going to have some kind of celebration, commemoration. What's going to be going on?
Well, as always, Juneteenth takes place, in the on the Saturday during the teen weeks, during the teen week of June, and that Saturday this year is the 19th, I believe, with the big celebrations taking place at Central Park. But for the 9 years leading up to last year with COVID, the opening ceremonies, so to speak, take place on the Friday night beforehand at the African American burying ground in historic Vale Cemetery. Unfortunately, we couldn't do the 10th annual last year, so we will be starting again with the first annual on Friday evening of the 18th. And what happens is we gather in the African American burying ground, and reenactors come, important speeches, and are given the history of many of the folks like Moses Viney and Corporal Jeffries, and some of the other folks buried there are told and understood, and we begin to commemorate the importance of that particular event and how it's great to see how it's filtering outside of just the African American community into more of the full-on American community.
And what are we celebrating again exactly?
We're celebrating basically the end of slavery.
Chris Leonard, thank you for spending some time with us today.
You're very welcome, Bill. Thank you for having me.